She was richer than Paris Hilton, more troubled than Lindsay Lohan, and more connected than Nicole Richie, yet somehow you've barely heard her name. Casey Johnson, heir to the Johnson & Johnson empire, was born into more money than most people could even imagine. But despite her golden last name, Casey's life wasn't a fairy tale. It was a slow, messy unraveling that ended in heartbreak, scandal, and silence. This wasn't just another wild heiress story. It was something darker and more tragic. From New York City's elite to the fringes of Hollywood's chaotic underworld, Casey's story is filled with missed chances, media feuds, betrayal, and a desperate search for identity. In the end, she would die alone in a stranger's guest house at just 30 years old, cut off from her family, abandoned by most of her friends, and left with only her name. So what really happened to the woman who had everything, yet somehow lost it all? Casey Johnson wasn't just wealthy. She was born into one of the richest families on Earth. Her great-great-grandfather co-founded Johnson & Johnson, a global health empire now worth over $400 billion. Her father, Woody Johnson, owned the New York Jets. Her childhood was a constant carousel of private chefs, Hamptons estates, and front-row seats at Fashion Week. But behind the luxury, there was something missing: love, attention, and approval. Especially from her cold, emotionally distant father. Diagnosed with type 1 diabetes at just 8 years old, Casey had to grow up faster than most kids. She even co-wrote a book about the disease with her parents. But her mother described her as a difficult child, someone with deep emotional needs that money couldn't fix. Her father tried to buy her peace with cars, designer bags, and luxury trips. But what Casey really wanted was simple: his affection. That emotional void would quietly haunt her, even as the world saw her as just another spoiled heiress. In the early 2000s, Casey Johnson wasn't just attending the party. She was the party. Best friends with Paris and Nikki Hilton, Nicole Richie, and Bijou Phillips, Casey helped redefine what it meant to be a celebrity socialite. Paparazzi followed their every move, and gossip columns devoured stories about their wild nights out. But while the others capitalized on fame, Casey stayed stuck in the shadows. When Paris offered her a spot as co-star on The Simple Life, Casey turned it down, a decision she'd later call the stupidest mistake of my life. The media wasn't kind to her. Headlines mocked her for dropping out of Brown because she couldn't bring her poodle to the dorms. Tabloids obsessed over petty stories like her chihuahua pooping in hotel suites or feuding with other heiresses. Behind the scenes, she was trying to find her footing, dabbling in beauty editing, pursuing acting, and constantly trying to prove she wasn't just a dumb blonde with a trust fund. But no matter how hard she tried, Casey couldn't escape the label that followed her everywhere: the Johnson & Johnson girl. Everything started to spiral when Casey made the biggest mistake of her public life, airing her family's dirty laundry in the press. After accusing her aunt of having an affair with her boyfriend, Casey unloaded to Page 6, triggering a scandal that rocked the ultra-private Johnson family. Her father, furious at the public humiliation, decided he'd had enough. Woody Johnson cut Casey off completely. No more trust fund, no more support. From that moment on, she wasn't just an heiress in crisis. She was on her own. Without money or stability, Casey's world crumbled. Her once glamorous lifestyle gave way to arrests, feuds, and tabloid meltdowns. She was accused of breaking into a friend's home and stealing lingerie and jewelry. Her relationships turned chaotic and violent, especially with Courtney Semmel, and later with Tila Tequila. What was once a life of headlines and high society became something darker, a public unraveling. And the people who once partied with her had now distanced themselves, watching from afar as Casey's life collapsed in full view. Despite the chaos, Casey still dreamed of something deeper. She wanted to be a mother. In 2007, she adopted a baby girl from Kazakhstan and named her Ava Monroe in honor of her idol Marilyn Monroe. For a brief moment, motherhood gave her purpose. Kathy Hilton threw the baby shower, and Nikki Hilton became Ava's godmother. But Casey's life was still unraveling behind the scenes. Her health was worsening, and her finances were gone. When her mother, Sale Johnson, realized Casey could no longer care for the child, she took custody and moved Ava to New York. Alone in LA, Casey was evicted from her home. Her electricity was cut off, and friends claimed she was living in squalor. She hid her Porsche to avoid repossession, and her dogs were left to run wild. She was hospitalized repeatedly due to diabetes complications, and her mental health declined rapidly. She clung to toxic relationships, and even staged a public engagement with Tila Tequila. But most of her old friends had walked away. By the end of 2009, Casey had lost her money, her home, her health, her daughter, and nearly everyone she'd ever trusted. On January 4, 2010, Casey Johnson was found dead in a guest house, alone, just days after New Year's Eve. She was only 30 years old. The cause? Diabetic ketoacidosis, a deadly complication of her type 1 diabetes. Despite rumors of overdose, toxicology reports showed no alcohol or illicit substances. Friends said she had been missing insulin doses or not managing her condition properly, while others claimed her diabetes had become dangerously brittle. Her death wasn't dramatic. It was quiet, and that made it all the more haunting. What followed was a media circus. Tila Tequila posted nonstop tributes claiming they were engaged and vowing to adopt Casey's daughter, despite barely knowing her. The Johnson family stayed silent, refusing even to let Tila attend the funeral. Casey, once born into one of the world's richest dynasties, was buried while the public fought over her story. In the end, all the money, fame, and headlines couldn't protect her. She was a girl with everything, except peace. And maybe more than anything, Casey Johnson just wanted to be seen for who she really was.